Have you ever noticed how investing advice sounds incredibly simple, but following it feels strangely hard? You're told to start early, stay consistent, ignore the noise. And yet, even people who know these things still feel unsure. They hesitate, they second guess, they stop and restart more times than they'd like to admit. What's interesting is that most investing mistakes don't happen because people don't know what to do. They happen because something quieter gets in the way. And that's what I want to talk about today. My name is Alex. I spend a lot of time thinking about why investing feels emotionally difficult, even when the rules themselves aren't complicated. This topic often feels invisible because most investing rules aren't technical failures. They're behavioral ones, shaped by fear, comfort, and timing rather than math. If you find yourself thinking about money in the slower, more reflective way, you might want to subscribe. And with that in mind, let's talk about the golden investing rules people hear about, but struggle to actually live by. Most people think investing success comes down to intelligence, picking the right assets, understanding markets, staying informed. But when you look closely, investing isn't really a knowledge problem. It's a behavior problem. Two people can read the same book, hear the same advice, and still get completely different results. Not because one is smarter, but because one builds a system that works with their psychology instead of against it. The rules that matter most aren't complicated formulas. They're simple ideas that protect you from yourself when emotions are high and clarity is low. And the reason these rules feel easy to ignore is because nothing bad happens right away when you break them. The consequences come later. Quietly. One of the most important truths about investing is that your brain isn't naturally wired for it. We evolved to react quickly, avoid loss, and follow social cues. Investing asks you to do the opposite. It asks you to wait, tolerate uncertainty, and ignore what everyone else is doing. That tension is where most people struggle. The first golden rule, whether people realize it or not, is that investing must fit your life before it fits a spreadsheet. If your investing plan requires you to be emotionally perfect, it won't survive real life. Markets move. Jobs change. Families need things. Stress shows up unexpectedly. A plan that looks good on paper, but collapses under pressure, isn't a good plan. It's a fragile one. The investors who last aren't the most aggressive. They're the most adaptable. Another rule people often underestimate is the importance of margin. Not just financial margin, but emotional margin. When all your money is working as hard as possible, your stress is also working overtime. Every downturn feels personal. Every delay feels dangerous. Money starts working better for you when some of it isn't trying to do anything impressive at all. Its job is to protect your patience. That's why emergency funds matter. Not because they earn returns, but because they absorb shocks. They keep your long-term investments from becoming short-term decisions. A lot of investing mistakes are actually liquidity problems disguised as discipline problems. People don't panic because markets drop. They panic because they need the money. Another rule that quietly shapes outcomes is understanding what you can control and letting go of what you can't. You can control how much you save. You can control how consistently you invest. You can control your exposure to noise. You can't control market cycles. You can't control headlines. You can't control timing perfectly. The moment you accept this, investing becomes calmer. You stop trying to outsmart uncertainty and start designing around it. This is where long-term thinking actually begins. Consistency matters far more than intensity. Small, repeated actions that survive boredom and doubt tend to outperform dramatic moves that require constant confidence. The irony is that investing rewards people who care less often, but care deeply when it counts. Another golden rule is that simplicity compounds better than complexity. Complex strategies feel smart. They give you something to explain, something to tweak. Simple strategies feel boring, and boredom makes people restless. But boredom is often a sign that a system is doing its job quietly. The more moving parts your investing plan has, the more opportunities there are for emotional interference. And emotional interference is expensive. One of the least talked about rules is that investing success often comes from avoiding big mistakes rather than making brilliant moves. You don't need to catch every opportunity, you just need to avoid the ones that derail you. Most long-term damage doesn't come from missing out. It comes from reacting at the wrong time. This is why patience isn't passive. It's protective. Another rule people struggle with is separating investing from identity. When your investments become a reflection of who you are, smart, disciplined, ahead of others, you become vulnerable. Losses feel personal. Doubt feels like failure. But when investing is treated as a process rather than a statement, setbacks become manageable. You're not wrong. The system just moved. That psychological distance makes consistency possible. Time is another rule that's widely misunderstood. People hear that time in the market matters, but they underestimate how uneven that time feels. Progress doesn't arrive smoothly. It comes in bursts, separated by long periods of nothing. This makes people question whether they're doing it right. But uneven progress isn't a sign of failure. It's a feature of how markets work. If your expectations assume constant improvement, you'll feel behind even when you're on track. Understanding this ahead of time prevents disappointment from turning into abandonment. Another golden rule is that comparison is corrosive. Investing outcomes are deeply personal. Different incomes, timelines, responsibilities, and tolerances all change what success looks like. Comparing your progress to someone else's highlight reel distorts your perception. It makes reasonable plans feel inadequate. The goal isn't to beat others. It's to build something that works for your life. The more you internalize that, the quieter investing becomes. Another rule that often gets ignored is that doing nothing is sometimes the most productive action. In a culture that celebrates action, stillness feels irresponsible. But investing often rewards restraint. Not reacting to every market movement isn't laziness. It's discipline. Restraint keeps costs low, taxes minimal, and emotions stable. It's not dramatic, but it's effective. One of the hardest rules to accept is that investing doesn't remove uncertainty. It just makes it manageable. There's no finish line where doubt disappears entirely. There's only increasing confidence in your process. That confidence grows slowly, through repetition, not revelation. And finally, one of the most important golden rules is that investing should support your life, not consume it. If you're constantly anxious, checking balances obsessively, or replaying decisions in your head, something is misaligned. Investing works best when it fades into the background, when it's boring enough to forget about most days. That's not disengagement. That's trust. The turning point usually happens when people stop asking how to be better investors and start asking how to be calmer ones. That shift changes everything. When calm becomes the goal, decisions improve naturally. When sustainability becomes the focus, consistency follows. When pressure fades, patience grows. You realize that the best investing rules aren't about winning faster. They're about staying in the game long enough for time to do the heavy lifting. Applying these ideas doesn't require drastic changes. It starts with noticing where your stress comes from. Which parts of your plan feel fragile? Which decisions demand constant reassurance? Strengthen those areas first. Build buffers. Reduce complexity. Lower the emotional stakes. You don't need perfect discipline. You need systems that forgive imperfection. Investing doesn't have to feel heroic. It just has to be survivable. Most people don't fail at investing because they ignore the rules. They fail because the rules they follow don't account for being human. The golden rules that matter most aren't flashy. They don't promise shortcuts. They don't eliminate uncertainty. They make room for real life. Progress in investing isn't about doing everything right. It's about doing enough right, consistently over time. You don't need to rush. You don't need to impress anyone. You don't need to be perfect. You just need a process you can live with. And when you build that, Quietly and patiently, investing stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like support. That's when it finally begins to work.